Have you ever witnessed a moment so powerful that it exposed someone's deepest shame in front of hundreds of people? What if I told you that sometimes the most beautiful dances happen between broken hearts and forgotten dreams, and that a 12-year-old girl in a wheelchair could teach a roomful of billionaires what love actually looks like? Prepare yourself for the most heart-shattering story you'll ever hear about redemption, acceptance, and the moment when a father's worst decision came back to haunt him in front of the entire world. This is the story of Daniel Rothschild, a man who had everything money could buy but nothing that actually mattered, and Emma Martinez, the daughter he abandoned who would teach him that true wealth can't be measured in dollars. My name is Sophie Martinez, and I'm about to tell you how one dance changed 3 lives forever. Because sometimes the most important lessons come from the people we least expect, and sometimes love finds a way to heal even the deepest wounds. 8 years ago, I was a 27-year-old physical therapist working at Children's Hospital Los Angeles when I met 4-year-old Emma Rothschild. She had been abandoned in the pediatric ward by her father after receiving a diagnosis of cerebral palsy, a condition that would require her to use a wheelchair for the rest of her life. Emma's mother, Rachel, was a broken woman. She sat by her daughter's bedside every day, crying silently while her husband Daniel Rothschild, yes, the pharmaceutical billionaire, refused to even visit the hospital. "He says he can't have a defective child ruining his image," Rachel whispered to me one day. "He's filing for divorce and wants to sign away his parental rights." I had never felt such rage toward another human being. Here was a beautiful, intelligent little girl whose only crime was being born with a condition that affected her mobility, and her own father saw her as damaged goods to be discarded. Emma was the brightest light in that hospital ward. Despite her physical challenges, she was curious about everything, kind to every nurse and doctor, and had a smile that could melt the coldest heart. Everyone who met her fell in love with her spirit. Everyone except the man who was supposed to love her most. Daniel Rothschild never came to see his daughter. Not once. He communicated only through lawyers, finalizing a divorce that gave Rachel minimal support, and establishing a trust fund for Emma that paid exactly $2,000 per month, barely enough to cover her medical expenses, let alone her care. 3 years later, Rachel lost her battle with breast cancer. She had fought so hard, not just against the disease, but against the poverty and stress that Daniel's abandonment had forced upon them. With her dying breath, she asked me to take care of Emma. "She loves you more than anyone," Rachel whispered. "You're the only mother she's ever really known." I adopted Emma when she was 7 years old, becoming a single mother to a child with special needs while working multiple jobs to afford her physical therapy, adaptive equipment, and the love she deserved. Daniel never contested the adoption. He was relieved to have his problem permanently removed from his life. But Emma wasn't a problem, she was a miracle. Emma Martinez was now 12 years old and the most extraordinary person I had ever known. Her cerebral palsy affected her legs and required her to use a wheelchair, but it had never limited her spirit, her intelligence, or her dreams. She was fluent in 3 languages, an honor student, and had developed a passion that surprised everyone who met her. Emma wanted to dance. When she first told me about her dream, I thought it would be impossible. But Emma's determination taught me that impossible is just a word people use when they're not creative enough to find solutions. I researched adaptive dance programs, enrolled in specialized training courses, and learned techniques for wheelchair choreography. Emma and I practiced for hours every evening in our small apartment. I would move around her as she spun and glided in her chair, creating beautiful patterns and telling stories through movement. Emma had a natural grace that transcended her physical limitations, and watching her dance was like witnessing poetry in motion. We started competing in adaptive dance competitions, and Emma quickly became a champion. She won regional contests, placed in national competitions, and developed a following of people who were inspired by her talent and determination. But more than the trophies and recognition, dance gave Emma confidence, joy, and a way to express herself that made her feel limitless. Our life was modest but rich. I worked as a physical therapist during the day and taught adaptive dance classes in the evenings, earning just enough to provide for Emma's needs and our simple happiness. Emma never asked about her biological father, accepting the story that he had died before she was old enough to remember him. I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth, that he was alive, incredibly wealthy, and had chosen to pretend she didn't exist. Everything changed when I saw the advertisement for the Rothschild Foundation annual charity gala. The irony was overwhelming. Daniel Rothschild was hosting a black tie fundraiser to benefit children with disabilities, raising money for the very population that included the daughter he had abandoned. I stared at that invitation for hours, feeling a rage that had been building for 8 years. This man had thrown away his own disabled child like garbage, and now he was using other disabled children as props for his public image and tax write-offs. Emma found me looking at the computer screen. "Mom, what's that fancy party?" she asked, reading over my shoulder. "It says it's for kids like me." "That's nice of them to want to help." Emma's innocent comment broke my heart and ignited my determination. "Emma," I said, "how would you feel about going to that party? You could show all those rich people that kids with disabilities don't need pity. They need opportunities." Emma's eyes lit up with excitement. "Could I dance there? Could I show them my routine?" I nodded, my mind already forming a plan that would expose Daniel Rothschild's hypocrisy in the most public way possible. The Rothschild Foundation annual charity gala was held at the Beverly Hills Hotel's Crystal Ballroom, the most exclusive venue in Los Angeles. Tickets cost $5,000 per person, and the guest list included Hollywood celebrities, tech moguls, and old money families whose names graced hospital wings and university buildings. I spent my entire savings on a beautiful dress for myself, and had Emma's favorite blue dress professionally tailored to look elegant with her wheelchair. Emma was excited for days, practicing her dance routine and talking about meeting fancy people who care about kids like me. As our taxi pulled up to the Beverly Hills Hotel, I felt my courage wavering. Valets in white gloves helped guests out of Rolls-Royces and Bentleys while photographers captured arrivals for Society magazines. Emma and I were clearly going to be the only people there who didn't belong to the billionaire class. "Mom, this is like a fairy tale," Emma whispered as we entered the ballroom. She was right. Crystal chandeliers cast sparkles across marble floors, and the room was decorated with thousands of white roses and gold accents. But I was focused on finding one person in that crowd of wealth and privilege. Daniel Rothschild stood near the main stage, surrounded by admirers and sycophants who laughed at his every word. He was 51 now, his dark hair touched with silver, wearing a custom tuxedo that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. He looked successful, confident, and completely untouchable. He was also standing alone. Despite being surrounded by people, I noticed that no one seemed genuinely comfortable in his presence. Conversations were brief and formal, and when he moved through the crowd, people stepped aside rather than toward him. Emma was taking in everything with wonder, her eyes wide at the opulence around us. "Mom, why does everyone look so serious? This is supposed to be a happy party for helping kids." She was right. Despite the supposed charitable purpose, the atmosphere felt cold and performative. People were networking rather than celebrating, checking their phones rather than engaging with the cause they were supposedly supporting. The evening's program began with Daniel taking the stage to welcome the guests. "Thank you all for joining me tonight," he said into the microphone, his voice carrying easily across the silent ballroom. "The Rothschild Foundation is committed to supporting children with disabilities, helping them overcome their limitations and find their place in society." I felt sick listening to him speak about limitations and finding their place in society, as if disabled children were problems to be managed rather than human beings with infinite potential. Emma, however, was listening intently, impressed by his authoritative presence. "Tonight, we're raising money for adaptive equipment, specialized therapy programs, and educational support for these vulnerable children," Daniel continued. "Together, we can make a difference in their lives and help them achieve whatever level of independence." The applause was polite but restrained. Even this wealthy audience seemed to sense something hollow in Daniel's presentation. He was saying the right words, but they felt rehearsed and empty. As the formal program ended and dancing began, I watched the social dynamics of the room. Daniel approached several women, asking them to dance, but each politely declined with various excuses. Word had apparently spread about recent scandals involving his pharmaceutical company's price gouging on children's medications, and his social reputation was suffering. Emma watched the dancing with fascination. "Mom, look how beautiful they all look together. Do you think anyone would want to dance with me?" My heart broke at the hopefulness in her voice. Of course, sweetheart. You're the best dancer here. But as I watched the crowd, I knew the truth would be different. These people would be polite but uncomfortable, offering platitudes while keeping their distance from the wheelchair-bound child, who reminded them of their own vulnerability. Emma rolled her chair toward a group of younger guests. "Excuse me," she said politely. "Would anyone like to dance with me? I do adaptive choreography and it's really fun." The group exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Oh, that's very sweet, dear," said a woman in diamonds worth more than my annual salary. "But I'm not sure how that would work exactly. Maybe later." Emma tried several more times with different groups, each encounter ending with polite refusal disguised as consideration for her limitations. I watched my daughter's confidence slowly deflate with each rejection, and my anger toward Daniel Rothschild reached a breaking point. If you believe that every child deserves to be celebrated for who they are, not pitted for what they can't do, leave the word "celebrate" in the comments. Subscribe because what happens next will show you the true meaning of courage and the power of a child's pure heart. Emma had tried approaching 8 different groups of people, and each had found a polite way to decline her invitation to dance. I could see her starting to understand that her presence was making people uncomfortable, and the joy in her eyes was being replaced with disappointment. "It's okay, Mom," she said quietly when she rolled back to me. "Maybe they just don't know how to dance with someone in a wheelchair. That's not their fault." Even in her disappointment, Emma was making excuses for the people who were rejecting her. Her capacity for understanding and forgiveness made their behavior even more heartbreaking. I was about to suggest we leave when Emma's attention was caught by the one person in the room who was also standing alone. Daniel Rothschild had struck out with every woman he had approached, and he was now standing by the edge of the dance floor, watching other couples with an expression that almost looked like loneliness. "Mom, look at that man," Emma said, pointing toward Daniel. "He looks sad. Nobody wants to dance with him either. Maybe he feels left out like I do." My blood ran cold. Emma was looking at her biological father with compassion, completely unaware that she was describing the man who had abandoned her 8 years ago. "Emma, I don't think that's a good idea," I started to say, but she was already rolling her wheelchair across the dance floor toward Daniel. I followed behind her, my heart pounding, knowing that in a few seconds, 8 years of secrets were about to explode in the most public way possible. Emma rolled up to Daniel and looked up at him with her brightest smile. "Excuse me, sir. You look like you might want to dance, but nobody's dancing with you. Would you like to dance with me? I promise I'm really good at it, even though I'm in a wheelchair." Daniel looked down at Emma, and I saw his face go through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, shock, and then something that might have been fear. He was staring at his daughter for the first time in 8 years, seeing the beautiful young woman she had become despite his abandonment. I'm sorry, what?" he stammered, clearly trying to process what he was seeing. Emma, interpreting his hesitation as concern about her abilities, became more encouraging. "I know it looks complicated, but I'm actually a really good dancer. I've won competitions. My mom taught me special moves, and I can make my chair spin and glide in time with the music. It's beautiful, I promise." Daniel's eyes found mine across the dance floor, and the recognition was instant and devastating. He knew exactly who I was, the physical therapist who had witnessed his abandonment of his daughter, who had become Emma's adoptive mother, who was now standing in his ballroom with the child he had tried to erase from his life. The ballroom around us seemed to sense the tension. Conversations quieted as people noticed the unusual interaction between the host and the young girl in the wheelchair. "Emma," I said, approaching them, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside me. "I'd like you to meet Daniel Rothschild. He's your biological father." The words dropped into the silence like a bomb. Emma's smile faltered as she tried to process what I had said. The nearby guests who had overheard gasped audibly. Daniel's face went completely white. "What?" Emma whispered, looking between Daniel and me with confusion. "But Mom, you said my father died when I was little." "I lied, sweetheart," I said, loud enough for the growing circle of listeners to hear. "Your father didn't die. He abandoned us when you were 4 years old because he couldn't accept having a daughter with cerebral palsy. He signed away his parental rights and cut off all contact rather than be associated with a disabled child." The silence in the ballroom was deafening. Hundreds of people were now watching our confrontation, including society reporters who were frantically taking notes and photographs. Emma stared at Daniel with wide eyes, trying to reconcile this information with the kind, charitable man she thought she was meeting. "Is that true?" she asked him directly. "Are you really my father? And did you really leave me because of my wheelchair?" Daniel opened his mouth but no words came out. He was trapped between his public image and the truth of his past actions, with his abandoned daughter looking up at him with eyes that held no anger, only confusion and hope. Emma, He started, then stopped, glancing around at the crowd of witnesses who were hanging on every word. "It's okay," Emma said gently, reaching out to touch his hand. "I understand if my wheelchair scared you. Lots of people don't know how to act around me at first. But look." She pushed herself backward from her chair and did a graceful spin, her arms extended elegantly. "I learned how to be beautiful anyway. Mom taught me that having different abilities doesn't make me less than other people." The pure innocence and forgiveness in Emma's words hit the ballroom like a physical force. Several women in the audience were crying openly. Even the hardened businessmen looked uncomfortable witnessing this display of unconditional love from a child toward the father who had abandoned her. Daniel was staring at Emma as if seeing her for the first time. You dance?" he asked weakly. "I'm really good at it," Emma said enthusiastically, her disappointment forgotten in the excitement of finally meeting her father. "Would you like to see? Or maybe you could dance with me? I've always wondered what it would be like to dance with my father." The request hung in the air like a challenge. Hundreds of people were watching, waiting to see what Daniel Rothschild would do when given a second chance to choose his daughter over his pride. I could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. He could reject her again, maintaining his image as someone who didn't associate with damaged people. Or he could accept her invitation and publicly acknowledge the daughter he had spent 8 years pretending didn't exist. "I don't know how to dance with someone in a wheelchair," he said finally, his voice barely audible. "That's okay," Emma said brightly. "I can teach you. It's easy once you understand how it works. You just have to move with me instead of trying to move me. Here, give me your hands." She reached up toward him with complete trust, waiting for him to accept her invitation. The entire ballroom held its breath. Daniel looked around the room at hundreds of faces watching his choice. Then he looked down at his daughter, really looked at her, and seemed to see her for the first time not as a disability or a problem, but as a remarkable human being who was offering him a gift he didn't deserve. Slowly, tentatively, Daniel reached down and took Emma's hands. "Okay," he whispered. "Teach me." The orchestra, sensing the moment, began playing a slow waltz. Emma guided Daniel's movements, showing him how to step around her chair as she spun and glided in perfect time with the music. At first he was awkward and uncertain, but Emma's confidence and joy were infectious. "That's it," she encouraged. "You're doing great. Now when I lean to the left, you step to the right and we create this beautiful mirror effect." See? As they found their rhythm, something magical happened. The awkwardness disappeared, replaced by a grace that surprised everyone watching. Daniel wasn't just tolerating the dance. He was participating in it, learning from his daughter, following her lead as she showed him a world of possibility he had never imagined. The ballroom was completely silent except for the music and the soft sound of Emma's wheelchair moving across the polished floor. Tears were streaming down faces throughout the crowd as they witnessed not just a dance, but a reconciliation 8 years in the making. "You're a natural," Emma laughed as Daniel spun her around with growing confidence. "I can see where I got my rhythm from." For the first time in 8 years, Daniel smiled at his daughter. Not a polite, distant expression, but a real smile filled with wonder and growing love. "Emma," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you're absolutely beautiful. I'm so sorry I missed watching you grow up." "It's okay, Daddy," Emma said, using the word for the first time. "You're here now. That's what matters." As the song ended, father and daughter came to a stop in the center of the dance floor. The silence stretched for several heartbeats, then erupted into thunderous applause. The entire ballroom was on their feet, witnessing what many would later describe as the most moving moment of their lives. But Emma wasn't finished. She rolled her chair to the microphone that Daniel had used earlier for his speech. "Excuse me, everyone," she said, her young voice carrying clearly across the ballroom. "I just wanted to say thank you for clapping for me and my daddy, but I also want to tell you something important." The crowd quieted, giving this remarkable child their complete attention. "My daddy said earlier that this party was to help kids with disabilities overcome their limitations and find their place in society. But I don't think that's right. Kids like me don't have limitations, we have different abilities. And we don't need to find our place in society. We need society to make room for us." Emma paused, looking around the ballroom with the confidence of someone far beyond her 12 years. "I'm not here tonight because I need your pity or your charity. I'm here because I wanted to show you that kids with disabilities are talented, smart, funny, and capable of amazing things. We just need people to give us the chance to prove it." She turned to look at Daniel, who was staring at her with something approaching awe. "My daddy made a mistake 8 years ago when he thought having a disabled daughter would make him look bad. But tonight, he learned that having a disabled daughter actually makes him look like the luckiest father in the world. Because I didn't just survive without him, I thrived. And now that he knows what he was missing, I think he's going to make sure other kids like me get the same chance to thrive." The applause this time was different, not polite charity event clapping, but genuine emotional appreciation for a child who had just delivered the most powerful speech any of them had ever heard. Emma rolled her chair back to Daniel and looked up at him expectantly. "Right, Daddy. You're going to help kids like me, but for real this time? Not because we're problems to be fixed, but because we're people to be celebrated." Daniel knelt down beside Emma's chair so they were at eye level. "Emma," he said, his voice breaking, "you just taught me more about courage, grace, and strength than I learned in 50 years of life. Yes, I'm going to help kids like you. But more importantly, I'm going to try to be worthy of being your father." The transformation of that ballroom was instantaneous. What had started as a cold, performative charity event became a genuine celebration of human potential and the power of unconditional love. Guests approached Emma not with pity or condescension, but with genuine interest in her dancing, her achievements, and her perspective. 6 months later, Daniel had restructured his entire foundation to be guided by people with disabilities rather than speaking for them. Emma became the youngest member of the board of directors, helping to direct funding toward adaptive programs that celebrated ability rather than focusing on limitation. But the most important change was in our family. Daniel didn't try to reclaim his parental rights or disrupt the life Emma and I had built together. Instead, he asked if he could be part of it, not as the father who had rights to her, but as a man trying to earn the privilege of her love. Emma, with the wisdom and forgiveness that had always defined her, welcomed him into our unconventional family. Daniel moved into a house near ours, spending every evening learning about the daughter he had missed watching grow up. He came to every dance competition, every school event, and every moment Emma was willing to share with him. A year later, at Emma's 13th birthday party, she made a speech that brought tears to everyone's eyes. "People always ask me if I'm angry that my dad left me when I was little. But I'm not angry, because that experience taught me that love isn't about DNA or obligation. It's about choice. My mom Sophie chose to love me when nobody else would. And now my dad Daniel is choosing to love me too, not because he has to, but because he wants to." I also learned that sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to the best things. If my dad hadn't left, I never would have had Sophie as my mom. And if I hadn't been born with cerebral palsy, I never would have learned to dance in a way that touches people's hearts. Emma looked around the room at the family we had created: Sophie, Daniel, and dozens of friends from the disability community who had become part of our extended family. "So thank you, universe, for making me exactly who I am. Thank you for giving me challenges that made me strong. And thank you for bringing all the right people into my life at exactly the right time." 2 years after that dance at the Beverly Hills Hotel, Emma won the National Adaptive Dance Championship and was invited to perform at the Paralympics opening ceremony. But more importantly, she had taught an entire community of wealthy, powerful people that disability is not something to be pitted or fixed. It's something to be celebrated and included. Daniel and I never became romantic partners. Our relationship was built entirely around our shared love for Emma and our commitment to her happiness. But we became genuine friends and effective co-parents, proving that families can be created in the most unexpected ways. The dance that started as Emma's innocent invitation to a lonely man at a party had rippled out into something much larger. It changed not just Daniel's life, but the entire culture of charitable giving in Los Angeles. Organizations began hiring people with disabilities as leaders rather than just recipients of services, and the conversation shifted from helping the disabled to learning from the disabled. Emma's story became nationally known, not as inspiration porn about overcoming disability, but as a powerful example of what becomes possible when society removes barriers instead of creating limitations. And Daniel? He learned that the love of a daughter is worth more than all the money in the world, and that true wealth is measured not by what you accumulate, but by what you're willing to give up for the people who matter most. If this story reminded you that love is a choice we make every day, and that the most beautiful moments often come from the most unexpected places, share it with someone who needs to remember that every person has value, regardless of their abilities or circumstances. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories about love, redemption, and the power of seeing people for who they truly are rather than what they appear to lack. Because in a world that often focuses on what makes us different, we all need reminders that what makes us human is our capacity to love, forgive, and choose each other again and again. Remember that your own love matters, your own choices have power, and somewhere, someone is waiting for you to see their worth when the rest of the world has turned away. Because we're all just people trying to love and be loved, and sometimes the most important dances are the ones that teach us how to move together despite our different rhythms.